Hello and welcome to episode 25 of More Knits. This is a video podcast where I talk to you about what I've been knitting. So 25, we are a quarter of a century old. That's actually quite young. But 25, we made it all the way to 25. It's taken a long time, but we made it, and ultimately that is what matters. So I actually don't have a ton of knitting to show you, but I do have a lot of progress to show you. So I don't have that many whips because I've just been working on the same whips. If you have been following me, you know that I'm working on getting through all of my whips because I have so many and they're kind of taking over my life, and I want to reduce as many as possible. So I'm working on finishing projects. And that means that I don't have as many projects to show you, but I do have a lot of progress to make, and I think, or to show you, and I think that we're going to have quite a bit to talk about nonetheless. So, how are you doing? I am honestly not great at the moment. Kind of come down with a bit of a cold this weekend, I think, or just feeling a bit under the weather. I don't know if it is stress, if it's the smoke, if it is just everything getting to me with everything that's going on. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I have a lot of personal things going on in my life. We've had a lot of things going on with the house recently, and just a lot of things happening. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that. It feels like new things happen every single day, and they are terrible and like world-altering things, or at least country-altering things. So it's crazy. I hope that you're hanging in there. I've really been thinking about social media in general and how sometimes I just want to run away from it and not even produce content either. But as I'm thinking about it, I think that getting away from things for just a bit is not only important, it really is vital to just our well-being and our health. So I hope that this is what this is for you, just a little reprieve from everything that's going on. We can talk about knitting, we can talk about some lighthearted things, and you know, knitting is something I do when I'm stressed. It's something I do turn to when I just need to clear my head or I need to just relax. I have a multitude of hobbies, and knitting is just one of those that really relaxes me. Even if it's a complex pattern, as you'll see, I'm working on a really big project at the moment. And it is a complex pattern and it takes a lot of mental energy from me, but it just is so soothing to me, regardless of how complicated the pattern is. So that's something that knitting does for me. So I want to talk about it with you. I have coffee that I am chugging. I have some water, and then I also have a cough drop nearby, just in case. I am giving you a very fall-inspired look today to try to make myself feel better. The lipstick is quickly coming off onto my coffee mug, so we'll see if that stays. Probably won't, but we are ready to get into the knitting, so let's do it. So you can't see my basket of whips today, but I do have it, and it's quite full. So as I mentioned, not many whips, but a lot of progress has been made. So I will start off with a sock whip. And I was looking back at my previous episodes, I was looking back at my show notes and could not find these socks anywhere. So I totally thought that I had shown you these and like in at least one episode, and I just can't find it at all. So I don't know if you've seen these. They're almost done, but it's possible you haven't. I mean, I've definitely shown them in a video. I just don't know if I've shown them on the podcast. Anyway, so I finished one, and these are just vanilla socks, heel flap and gusset, cuff down. That is my normal sock recipe or pattern that I follow. I knit 60 stitches on US zeros. And for this sock, hold on, I'm literally like chugging coffee and I hate doing that, but I feel the need. So this is using Tink yarn. It is a hand-dyed yarn, and I think the colorway is Go Nights Go. I'm like 99% positive that's what it is, but I can't find the label. I can't find a project in Ravelry. Like, I can't find anything about these socks, and I swear I've written something about them somewhere. So I don't know why these socks just like don't exist in any sort of documentation, but I just can't find it. Anyway, so I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And it is a Vegas Nights inspired colorway. My partner picked this yarn up when he was in Las Vegas. And it's a very different colorway for me. This is not colors that I typically gravitate towards, but I really like these colors. I think this is fun. It's kind of funky. I think it worked up in socks really well, and I mean, they're kind of the perfect Halloween socks, you know, so I will definitely have them finished by Halloween, and these will be my Halloween socks. So I knit a 2x2 cuff, and then I added this little purl ridge on the bottom, and that was right after the ribbing and before I started the stockinette, just like for some interest. I sometimes add some little details like that in my vanilla socks if I'm getting bored or if I just want to. I just think it's fun. And then also in my heel flap, I added a little garter stitch ridge. And I know a lot of knitters do this, and a lot of podcasters talk about it. So I definitely copied this. I think it's really cool though. It's very subtle, but it's just a nice little like change from the normal heel flap. And all you do is you just knit the first 3 and the last 3 stitches of your heel flap. And then you continue on with your eye of partridge or whatever heel flap you decide to do. And so the first and the or the beginning and the end of the heel flap becomes a little garter ridge of just 3 stitches. So it's really easy. It's honestly easier than doing eye of partridge the entire heel flap because it's really easy to pick up. You just pick up the purl ridges when you pick up for your gusset. So it's really easy to do. But of course, since I changed things up, I completely forgot to do that for the second sock. So this one unfortunately does not have that. It just looks like a regular eye of partridge heel flap. So yeah, that was, you know, I was trying to do something interesting and fun and kind of failed, but it's whatever. These socks are from me, and, you know, I'll notice, of course, but like, do I really care? Definitely not enough to rip out a sock heel because, yeah, I just don't care enough to do that. Yeah, finished the first sock, and then I immediately wove in the ends and cast on a second sock because, again, trying to finish up whips here, trying to get in a better habit of doing that. You know, I think we all fall out of the habit of finishing things, weaving in the ends immediately, blocking, all of the sorts of finishing things that just are not as fun as the actual knitting. It's sometimes hard to stay motivated to do that, so I'm really trying, like, immediately when I finish a project, get the ends woven in, block it, do whatever I need to do to completely finish it, so that it's not just languishing somewhere where it's like almost done but not quite done. Yeah, so socks. Working on the second sock, and I'm working on just the foot, so I finished the gusset, and I'm probably halfway through the foot, a little less than halfway, I'd say. So I have a few more inches to go, probably like 5 or 6 more inches to go on this foot, and then I will be done. And I've kind of been saving any vanilla socks for like work meetings or any, if I'm watching something that's super engaging, something like that. I saved my vanilla socks for that type of thing because the only other project I'm working on is very complex. For the most part, I can pay attention while I'm working on this other project, but there are definitely some parts where like I make a mistake or for some reason I'm just like heavily paying attention to the chart, and then I realize I've kind of missed the last like 30 seconds or so of whatever I'm doing. So I make sure that I'm watching something that's like easy to follow and not too complicated. So that leads me into my next whip, which is a sweater. Surprise, surprise, no one's surprised. So I think you have seen this sweater quite a few times over the length of my podcast. I cast it on, I thought it was last summer, and then I went to look at my my Ravelry project page, and I cast it on last May. So it has been well over a year since I first cast this on. This is the Daffodil by Marie Wallin. It is an all-over lace and cable sweater. It's knit in pieces, it's knit bottom up. There's a lot going on here, and it's not the most amazing sweater to knit, I will say. I remember when I cast this on, I was really looking for a complex project that I could really dive into. And then a year later, I'm still working on it. So it's been a big project. I probably would not have cast this on today, if I'm being perfectly honest. I honestly don't know how I've gotten through so much of this sweater, because I'm working on the sleeves right now and I'm just done with it. So I'm so close, I will finish it, but I'm just like thinking back to how I got this much progress made in this sweater, and like I truly don't know how I did it. I actually did vlog this though. My last video that I uploaded is a little vlog over a weekend, over a long weekend, where I was working on the front of this, and I didn't finish the front in that weekend. I think I did the following weekend, so that would have been last weekend. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't fully finish it then, but I made so much progress, and really I was just sitting on the couch the majority of the day watching movies and listening to podcasts and just knitting. Like that's how I got through so much of this. So I'll actually show you what I have. Okay, so this is the front. As I mentioned, it is knit bottom up and it's knit in pieces, so I need to seam it all together. Yeah, so here's the motif. It is 3 lace panels and 2 kind of cable panels. They're not this little section right here is actually not cables, but it's just twisted stitches. So that's a really weird way to put it, because it's not twisted stitches in the way we normally think of twisted stitches, but it's just 2-stitch cables. That's what I mean. So it is technically cables. Yeah, it's technically cables because you're swapping the position of the stitches, but since all of the little cables that make up this panel are just twisted, why does my brain want to say that? Are just 2-stitch cables, you don't need a cable needle, and so it's really simple to do. But I mean, it is complex, and this is a 30-row repeat, I think, somewhere around there. I think it's a 28-row repeat. Anyway, it's like not the most complicated thing in the world, but it is relatively like involved. You do have to pay attention to what you're doing, especially with this like cable panel here, because the rest rows, or the wrong side rows, are not actually rest rows for the front and the back. So you don't really get a row where you're just like, cool, I can just like knit and purl the entire row, because you really do have to pay attention to what's going on here. And I mean, it's really cool. You can see that inside some of the cables is knit stitches, and then sometimes it's purl stitches. So I really hope I didn't make a mistake on that section I'm showing you, because that would be embarrassing. But I think for the most part, whenever I did make mistakes, I went back and fixed them. There might be like one mistake in here, but I was pretty careful about making sure that I went back and fixed any mistakes I made, or just like trying really hard not to make them in the first place. But I'm sure that there's mistakes that I didn't see, because I mean, that's just inevitable. So yeah, this is the front, and then the selvage, or the side here, is reverse stockinette. So I get to seam this together, and then that's the neck. Almost knocked over my basket of whips. This is the neckline. So it's slightly curved. It does come up pretty high, which I don't know. I think I'm kind of going away from. You can see where this sweater that I'm currently wearing sits, I think is like a little bit more flattering, or I just like it a little bit more than like up here. A lot of hand knit sweaters do have a very high neckline. If you really like look for that, you'll start to notice that a lot of the very popular sweaters just come up super, super high. My neighbors are playing super loud music right outside the window, so I hope that you can't hear that. If you can, my apologies. So you can see like there is some shoulder shaping here, and then definitely shaping for the neckline. This was pretty fun. I will say that the pattern it does not really hold your hand that much. There's enough information to be able to work the pattern, of course. Like, I mean, I have knit some patterns where it's like just figure it out. And this pattern, it'll tell you one side and then it's like do the reverse for the other side. So it's not that it doesn't tell you the entire thing. You do have to kind of figure out, okay, I'm going to reverse this now. So how does that work? You do have to choose your own decreases that will make, like, that will look the best, that sort of thing. And there were a couple times where I was like, you know, I'd try this decrease and make sure, like, does it lean that way? Does that look the best? Should it lean this way? So there's a little bit of thought in there on the part of the knitter, which, you know, when you're knitting something like this, especially if you are not knitting the sample size, that can be, you know, that's just something you have to account for. You have to understand and prepare that you will need to come up with some of your own techniques to kind of fill in the gaps of the pattern. But it is, like I said, there's enough information in the pattern so that you can really glean what you need to do. And if you just think about it, you know, if you kind of just stop and think about it for a few minutes and think like, okay, this is the right side of the neckline, so I need my decreases to be right leaning on the right side, then, you know, you can really start to understand what you're knitting and why you would choose a certain decrease over another one. So it's not too complicated to figure out. I think any advanced beginner or intermediate knitter can figure it out, but you might need to pause a bit, you might need to put it away and come back, that sort of thing. It does not spell everything out for you, so you do have to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit on your own. And there actually is not that many projects on Ravelry for this pattern. I think a lot of Marie Wallin patterns are that way because although they're beautiful and typically well written, at least from what I've seen, they're just very involved and very complex, and I love watching other knitters talk about her patterns that they've knit, but it's a lot. I mean, I don't know when the next time I'll knit another Marie Wallin pattern. Actually, two YouTubers who I follow who talk about Marie Wallin patterns or who have knit several of her patterns are Fruity Knitting and Stitching Over the Days. Those are two podcasts. I will link them below. Those are both really big podcasters and they certainly don't need my shout out, but just if you're interested in people who have knit Marie Wallin patterns, those are some great podcasts to watch. So the back of the sweater looks very, very similar. It just does not come down as far for the neck, but it is, yeah, it really is just the same thing. But this is the back panel. So I am knitting this pattern. I'm basically following the instructions for most of it. I knit the length, the body length, a couple of inches shorter. I think it called for 20-inch length and I knitted about 18 3/4 inches long. So I just shortened it a bit just because I am shorter, and so I do tend to shorten my sweaters so that they're not super long. They kind of fit me as it fits the model if I shorten it a little bit. So I just typically do that, but I think that's the only modification that I've made. I think everything else I've followed exactly to pattern. So overall I really liked this pattern and the way that it's written up. I do remember for the back panel that I had some issues understanding the top here, not just the shoulder shaping, but the actual like the neck line here in the middle, because what you do is you keep your stitches on hold. So let's see, it looks like my scrap yarn came out, so some of these stitches don't have a holder. That's kind of terrifying. I will remedy that in a moment. But from here to here is the neckline on the back, and so you keep these stitches on hold, and you do the same for the front. And I'm assuming you'll just pick those stitches up to knit the neckband. And so that makes it really easy. You don't actually have to like pick up the bound off stitches. You can just slip your needle through those stitches, and that, you know, just makes it really simple. But I do remember having like difficulty understanding the pattern when it got to this point, and I did it wrong like 3 times, and I was just like, what is it telling me to do? What is going on? And then I had absolutely no issues with the front. So I wonder, I did this about a year ago, and I wonder if I just was less experienced and was just reading the pattern wrong, because I can't imagine that the front and the back would be written that much differently. Or there might have been a typo. I can't remember. I would have to go back and look at the pattern and try to like figure it out again, but I think I just was less experienced of a knitter and was just having a bit of trouble figuring that out, but in retrospect it actually wasn't that difficult to figure out. So that's what I mean. Sometimes you just need to put it away and come back to it. Maybe you're just reading it wrong and you just need to reread it with a clear head, because I think that's what happened to me. I forgot to tell you about the yarn. So the yarn I'm using is Rowan felted tweed in the colorway Clay. And it's such a nice yarn. It's a fingering weight. It is 100% wool. And it's like surprisingly soft, but it's got a really nice halo to it. And then the tweed has like blue and black flecks in it. And it's really, really beautiful. This is not the pattern, or this is not the yarn that the pattern called for. But when Fruity Knitting, Andrea, I think is her name, Andrea, I think it's Andrea and Andrew, when she knit this sweater, she used Rowan felted tweed, and I think she used a green color, and I thought it looked great. So I decided to copy her and do the same thing with the same yarn, but I went with the gray because that's so much more wearable to me, and I just love my neutrals. I would say this yarn is like a mid-range in terms of how pricey it is. Actually, let's look up how expensive it is. Rowan felted tweed. I know I got this from Webb's, and on Webb's website it is $12.95 per skein USD, and it contains 190 yards. Oh, and it's actually classified as a DK, but I would definitely say this is a fingering. I don't know. Yeah, I would say it's a fingering. So is it the cheapest yarn? No. It's also not the most expensive yarn out there, but I would say this is like a luxurious sweater to me. I really wanted to knit this sweater in nice yarn, and this is not like a cheap project for me at all. But I did not like take out a mortgage for this sweater, so it's kind of a mid-range for me yarn, and it's really nice. I like it a lot. Alright, and then as I mentioned, I am working on the sleeves, and I've made quite a bit of progress, I would say. I'm working on them 2 at a time for 2 reasons. One, I'm really bad at making sure that my sleeves are exactly the same length. I'm also bad at that with my socks. Sometimes my socks will be a little bit off. One will be a little bit shorter than the other. I measure like 3 times. I don't know why I'm so terrible at that. So to counteract that, working on them 2 at a time, you know, there's no issues there. And then the second reason I'm doing it with this particular pattern is that when I was knitting the front and the back, you can see that there's multiple panels of the same, like with this lace, there's 3 panels of lace. And so I got pretty good at remembering, you know, knitting the first section of the lace and then kind of remembering that row of the chart. And so then the other 2 panels of lace would be easier because I would kind of remember what row I was on. And so I figured that with the sleeves, it would be the same way. So knitting them flat, of course, and you know, when I knit 1 row of the lace, then I just work on the other sleeve and I kind of remember what row I'm on. So I think I'm going a lot faster because of that, but it does still feel a little slow going just because, I mean, it's still a lot to pay attention to. One of the things I really, really like though about the sleeves is that there is not that cable panel. So there are 2 cables here and here, but there's not that whole panel of cables that I was talking about that was kind of difficult because there's no rest rows, and you really have to pay close attention to it, and it's not that intuitive. It's not as intuitive as the laces. And the sleeves don't have that. So I'm really happy because it means I get rest rows. It means it's gonna go a lot faster. I'm really wanting to get these sleeves done as quickly as possible. This is like the only thing I'm working on right now in order to do that. If you put these together, like, I've made it like halfway through a sleeve. So I'm making relatively good progress. I think I need to knit these sleeves to, how long do they need to be? they need to be 44 centimeters, which is around 17 or 18 inches long, which is a pretty typical length for a sleeve. So I'll probably stick with that. I was gonna say I might shorten them, but I don't know. Do I have long arms? I think I have pretty average arms. So I have about 6 inches so far, and I'm almost done with the increases on the sleeves. So if I need to knit, let me double check that inch measurements. I need 11 inches to go on each sleeve, so 22 inches total. So let's see, 22 inches divided by... So I need to knit about 1.5 inches on each sleeve a day for 7 days to finish the sleeves. Honestly, that's not too bad. That's like, yeah, that's not too bad. So I think I can probably do that. Minus some weekdays. I don't always feel up to knitting on this project after work. It just kind of depends on what my day was like. So let's say about 2 weeks, I should have this completed. So by my next podcast, I can have this completed, right? Right? I do still need to block all of the pieces, weave in the ends, and seam it. So I'll say by my next podcast, I will have the knitting done on this sweater, but maybe not the seaming and the blocking and the neckband and all of that. So we'll see on that, but I am making good progress to finish this. I really haven't knit that much on it this weekend, to be honest. Weekends are typically my time to get progress made because my weeks are just, they vary so much. I never know if I'm gonna actually have knitting time. But this weekend my hands have hurt too much because I've been playing too much Super Mario Galaxy that I can't knit. So I haven't knit that much this weekend. Whoops, but maybe, hopefully this week I'll have some more time to actually do some knitting. I also wanted to touch on the 2 at a time. So I don't knit 2 at a time that often, but I do hear some people talk about how it can get really, not necessarily frustrating, but it can just be like confusing or tedious to knit 2 at a time. And I definitely understand where you're coming from, because one of the reasons I don't like color work that much is because it's so tedious and there's just skeins of yarn and different strands and all of that just kind of like flying everywhere, and I don't love that. But I will say that 2 at a time has not been that difficult for me. I just keep my 2 skeins of yarn next to me like this, and every time I turn a row and I need to switch yarns, I just make sure to switch them. And that way they don't ever get tangled. The only twist they have is just like one twist that I can just, you know, move one skein and untwist it. And I don't like let it sit there and work several rows and then start to untwist the skeins. I untwist them like immediately, and that way they're basically just never twisted. And that works really well for me. If you're like in the car or something like that where it's a little bit, you know, you don't have like a table or a couch or something where you can set your skeins, I can understand why that would be difficult, or if you have them in like a project bag or something. I totally get why that would be kind of a hassle, but if I'm just, you know, at home, which I have been for the past few months, then if I'm just at home, I can set them on my table, my desk, couch, whatever, just kind of set them next to me, and it's not that big of a deal. So I actually really like knitting these sleeves 2 at a time, and it really does, like, knowing that once I'm done with this, that I am done knitting is so nice. I know that it's like, it will take me just the same amount of time as if I had knit them individually, but just there's something about like once I bind off, I'm done, that gets me really excited. So for some reason that little trick works for me. So that is all that I'm working on at the moment. I do have a few more whips that I have been working on the past few weeks that I am not showing on the podcast because they are part of my Finish the Whip series. So if you're interested in those, you can check that series out. I have a couple of videos, and next week I will put out a video updating you on the progress that I've made on all of those whips, and that includes this sweater that I'm working on. But I didn't want to double up too much and just rehash all of the projects over and over to you, so I've decided to kind of split those off into another series, and you can watch that if you're interested, but if not, you're not missing out on too much that I'm currently doing. And I'm almost done. I've almost caught up with all of my whips, and then I can cast on whatever I want. Not really, because I do have my next two projects planned, and one of them is a gift, which is a little bit of obligation knitting, but out of love, and I'm happy to do it. So I will be working on that project. And then my next project is actually a sweater that I started right before I decided to finish all of my whips, and I didn't get very far into that sweater. So I will just jump back into that sweater, and that's not really a part of my like long-term whips because I had just started it. So I'm kind of gonna treat that sweater as if I just cast it on. But it's another gray fingering weight sweater. Yeah, I don't know why I do this to myself, but I do for some reason. All right, everyone, I think that's all for me. My neighbors are really ramping up for a giant party, so I'm gonna turn the camera off, put some noise canceling headphones in, and then edit this video. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.